It's official. Canada has stopped building someone else's dream. For generations, our factories poured steel, sweat, and skill into fueling America's growth, their cars, their pipelines, their power grids. We built their prosperity while quietly sidelining our own. But that story is changing, fast. In a striking new interview, Minister of Industry Mélanie Joly laid out what could become one of the most defining shifts in modern Canadian economics, a full-scale pivot from building for America to building for Canada. She didn't make the announcement with slogans or spectacle. She delivered it with composure, firm, steady, and unmistakably deliberate. She said, "This is the moment we stop waiting for demand from abroad and start shaping it right here, at home." Because what Joly described isn't just another policy update, it's an economic awakening. The very vision Prime Minister Mark Carney has been carefully constructing since his first day in office, now moving from principle to practice. This isn't rhetoric anymore, it's reality taking form.
So we're thinking about steel, aluminum, and lumber because we need to support the workers. And at the same time, we're very much aware that we need to strike the right balance. We need to make sure that indeed prices don't go up. And that's going to be the job of the procurement minister to make sure that that's the case. But at the same time, Karen, we're seeing all across the world is heightened protectionism. We're seeing that in the US, we're seeing that in the EU, in Asia as well. And so as these countries themselves are doing their own by, France or by EU policies, we need to be able to react because we need to be able to protect our own workers and our own industries. So that's why we're coming up with that policy.
Joly didn't sugarcoat it. This isn't about symbolism anymore. It's about survival. She went straight to the fault line of Canada's economic struggle, U.S. tariffs, Trump's protectionist agenda, and the rising unpredictability of the American market. For years, Canadian industries have lived under that shadow, reacting to Washington's politics instead of shaping their own destiny. In Hamilton's steel mills, Halifax's shipyards, and Ontario's auto corridors, entire communities have watched their future hinge on decisions made across the border. And when Trump's tariffs hit, the illusion finally broke. The partnership Canada thought it had wasn't partnership at all. It was dependency disguised as diplomacy. Joly called it what it is, a breaking point, a line in the sand. Canada can no longer orbit America's instability. It must set its own course, or risk being pulled under by someone else's chaos.
So the problem we have right now in our steel industry is a lot of our steel plants have been developed on a model to serve the U.S. auto market. And the type of steel they develop is not necessarily the type of steel that is required for construction. So while we're coming up with new major projects such as LNG pipelines or things that will require a lot of steel, we need to help our steel plants to pivot and adapt and develop the type of steel, to produce the type of steel that is required. So while that is happening, and I'm working with all the steel plants to do that, and we have a fund to support them at Algoma Steel in Sault Ste. Marie or Dofasco or ArcelorMittal in Hamilton, we will make sure that the proponents of major projects are able to import steel that is linked to what they need while they pivot bit by bit and take Canadian steel. So there will be a transition, but the goal is definitely to support our steel workers and to have the right type of steel for our own domestic market.
For decades, steel plants across Ontario and Alberta were built to serve one customer, the United States. Every furnace, every shipment, every blueprint aligned with American demand. But not anymore. Under this new industrial pivot, those same plants are being retooled to build for Canada, for our pipelines, our bridges, our homes, and our railways. We're no longer forging steel to power someone else's economy, we're forging it to strengthen our own. Joly made it plain and powerful. We're helping our steel plants pivot to produce the kind of steel Canada needs. This isn't just an economic adjustment, it's psychological. For the first time, Canada is declaring that it will no longer be an extension of America's industry. It will be the architect of its own.
And now, the second phase is part of your project, your major projects list, and it's coming under new rules. So you say it's a goal, but will it be a requirement? Like, what is the room for exemption here where these projects are backed by the private sector?
So I answered already your question, because if we make it a requirement right now, we don't have the type of steel needed. So we need to make sure that it's a requirement over time. And so I've already started these conversations, for example, with ATCO, which is an important pipeline proponent for a big LNG project, to make sure that they're able to build quickly, because that's what we need. We need to create economic growth. We need to create jobs. And at the same time that we work with Algoma Steel and the FASCO to make sure that that happens.
When asked about how this plan would actually work, Joly didn't deflect. She delivered details. She spoke about direct coordination with Canadian firms like ATCO and Alsteel, companies now working hand in hand with the government to match production to domestic needs. From infrastructure to clean energy, these industries are shifting their focus inward, building for Canadians, not just for customers abroad. And then came the line that summed up the national mood. Everyone has the maple leaf tattooed on their hearts right now, she said. It wasn't poetry, it was proof. Proof that this movement isn't built on slogans, but on momentum. Carney's government isn't isolating Trump with speeches or threats. It's isolating him by making him irrelevant. Every local supply contract, every Canadian-made shipment, every domestic project chips away at Washington's economic grip on Ottawa. By this spring, Joly confirmed, the Buy Canadian Act becomes law, mandating that every major federal project, from housing to shipbuilding to energy, use Canadian steel, Canadian labor, and Canadian design by default. The ripple effect will be massive. Canadian manufacturers won't have to wait for U.S. contracts anymore. They'll have steady, reliable demand here at home. Even the defense sector is shifting. Shipyards in Halifax and Vancouver are now constructing new vessels entirely from Canadian steel. It may sound small, but symbolically, it's historic. Because for the first time in generations, the ships defending Canadian waters will be built from Canadian soil.
I'm very much aware that U.S. tariffs are having an impact on the auto sector. Nobody is surprised by this.
Yeah, of course.
But what I'm saying to GM and Stellantis is we have a fund to support you. We have a way to get through this. And by the way, we were there in 2008 and 2009. We took stakes in your company. We Canadians made sure that you would be able to get through this. And a lot of Canadian taxpayers' money was involved. Now, it's time for you to be there for Canadians.
And that's where this story turns political. When asked about Trump's auto tariffs, Joly didn't sound defensive. She sounded determined. She made it clear, Canada will back its own companies, its own workers, and its own industries without waiting for a handshake from Washington. Her message to American policymakers was subtle but unmistakable. Canada isn't waiting for exemptions anymore. We're building our own alternatives. In diplomatic language, that's a shot across the bow. Carney and Joly's approach isn't about confrontation. It's about evolution, isolating Trump not by fighting him, but by making him irrelevant. They're crafting an economy that stays stable, self-reliant, and strong no matter what chaos erupts in U.S. politics. Trump's tariffs were once a weapon. Now they look like the spark that forced Canada to stand on its own 2 feet. And that's where Carney's grand strategy comes full circle. From his trillion-dollar investment plan to Joly's steel revolution, the pieces are coming together. The Build Canada Homes initiative,
The Buy Canadian Act and this new industrial pivot all share one defining goal: to make Canada the master of its own production, the owner of its own future. This isn't isolation, it's insulation, a shield of sovereignty built on strength, not dependency. Canada still trades with America, yes, but we're not waiting for it. We're no longer asking what America wants. We're asking what Canada needs. That's the shift. That's the story. And that's the moment our country began to build for itself again. Because independence isn't declared in speeches. It's built in factories, shaped by workers, and written into policy. And today, all of that belongs to Canada. This is Canada Newsline, where we don't just report what's happening, we explain why it matters.